So much again for the wonderful introduction there. So excited to be with you guys tonight. I'll go ahead and share my screen, make sure that's coming through okay for everybody. Give me a moment to pull that up. There we go. Hopefully that all looks okay, and get my chat window back up too so I can follow along with the chat here. Well, guys, it is so great to be with you here tonight talking about Google Sheets, one of my favorite tools. I absolutely love Google Sheets. I use it all the time for so many things. If you're a little intimidated by spreadsheets, I don't want you to have any fear. Tonight, everything we're looking at is going to be stuff that we're going to ease you into. You don't have to know how to do formulas or pivot tables or anything like that. If you want to, I'm happy to talk about those things too. But what we're focusing on more tonight is creative ways to use Google Sheets with your students as like student activities, student projects, things like that. So first thing first, we want to make sure everybody can get to the agenda document. If you're watching the recording later, you'll probably want to use the bit.ly link that is up on the screen here, bit.ly/Curts-sheets. For everybody else, though, I'll go ahead and I'll copy the link directly to the agenda and drop that into the chat. That may be easier for you to click on rather than typing in the bit.ly, but either way, that link will get you to our agenda document that has everything that we're going to be looking at tonight, and probably a little bit more. This has continued to grow, as everything does over the years. There's always more and more cool projects and activities, and so I tend to add things to this each year, and it has grown. And so it's possible that we may not get through everything in here. So I'm going to try to prioritize. I'm going to try to, I might skip a few things or go in a bit of a different order depending upon our interests and needs here tonight. But this is the document that should get you into. At the top of that document, it's all my contact info. So if you need to get in touch with me, my email's there, Twitter, YouTube, my email discussion group, my weekly email newsletter, all that stuff, everything's right there at the top. So if you need to get in touch with me or access any of those great resources, please do that. And then the rest of the document is all of the activities. And I think we've got about 8 or 9 activities here in the document. And they don't go in any particular order. It's not like from easiest to most difficult. I just try to put them in some sort of an order here. And we're going to try to work down through these. Like I said, we may not get to everything, but I'm going to try to get to as much as we can. But as we go through this, please let me know if you have questions at any point. I do not want anybody to get left behind or feel confused about anything. So as we go through these different resources here, feel free to throw things in the chat or just unmute and holler at me, whatever works best for you. But that is the plan for our time here together tonight. All right, well, fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and get on into this. I'm going to skip through all the intro stuff because you guys already know who I am. So we're just going to get on to our agendas. Like I said, we've got about 8 or 9 activities. We're going to start at the top, start working our way down through these and see how far we get. Awesome. All right. So and by the way, like I said, you don't need anything special for this session other than a Google account. I just always like to show this particular slide because I think it's funny because this is, of course, a image I created here to represent Google Sheets. And no, I don't actually have Google Sheets on my bed. I wish I did. That would be wonderful, but I don't. So, all right. Well, let's get on. And again, one last time, bit.ly/Curts-sheets for anybody who still needs to access the resource document. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get on into this. And we're going to start off with the most basic. Okay, we're going to definitely start getting into some more interesting things as we go here, but we definitely want to start with the basics. And one of the most important things about using Google Sheets with our students is analyzing data. Our students can collect real world data and then draw conclusions from it. Maybe they're going to do a survey. Maybe they're putting together a survey and they're going to send it out to the whole, school, or maybe they're sending it to another school. One of the very first activities I ever did. This is year 31 for me in education, like my first year of teaching. I taught math. our students put together a set of questions, and we sent it to other schools that were somewhat different than us. We were a suburban school, so we found a rural school and an urban school, and we sent these questions off to them, and then the students analyzed all the results when they got them back. So maybe it's something like that, or maybe the students are finding real world data from one of the many wonderful websites out there that provides data, and then they're drawing conclusions or making predictions. So let's do a little bit of that tonight. Let's start off with that. The idea that, yes, that is one of the most common uses of sheets, but it is an absolute great thing for it. So to do this, if you are in our agenda, and you scroll on down to page 2, and I can put this link in the chat as well, but you'll notice that right here at the top of page 2, the first thing under analyzing data, it says sample data collection form. So I've put together a form, and I would ask, if you don't mind, go ahead and take a moment and fill this form out. This is going to be our data collection for tonight, so we've got some data to work with. If you give a click on that form link, this is what will pop up, and I'll go ahead and copy and paste that into the chat too for those that make it a little bit easier. If that's easier, just to click on it there. Now, this is anonymous. It's not collecting your name. It's just collecting some raw data so that we can do something with this data. So it asks, like, what type of a community do you live in? How old are you? How many siblings do you have? How many pets do you have? What is your height? How many letters are in your first name, and what month were you born in? So I'll go ahead and fill this out. It's actually kind of odd now. When I think about it, I've checked suburban almost my entire life, but I recently moved more out into the country. And so technically I am, I guess, living in a rural location now. So I will change that from what I used to choose on that. But I had 3 siblings. I've got 3 pets. And then, oh no, I've got to do math here. So I guess 74 inches tall, 4 letters in my name, and I was born in June. So that would be 6. There we go. Okay, so there's my info. I'm going to go ahead and submit that into there. And if you guys don't mind taking a moment and submitting yours, that's going to give us some data to work with here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take your data, and actually lots of data that other people have done this before you. So your data is not the only data in this. Lots of other people have taken this exact same form when I've taught this session before. And so there's actually quite a lot of data in there. But what we want to do is take a look at some data and say, so what could you do with it if the students did a survey, if they did collect data from some website? And there's a lot of great links here below for sites that provide data sets. So further down in this bulleted list, you'll see there's sites like Data is Plural, Our World in Data, Data USA, Google's data set search, and on that provide real world data that we can use with our students. Okay, now, hopefully you had a chance to fill out that form and include your data. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. There's enough data in there that it's totally fine if you didn't get a chance to fill it out. But if you look at the second link, the link below that now is going to let you open up a copy of the collected data. And so I'm going to copy that link as well, and I'll put that in the chat. If it's easier for you to click on it there, you can certainly do that. But I'm going to go ahead and give a click right on it here in my my document. It says, would you like a copy of the responses? I say, yep, that's what I want. So we're all getting our own copy. We're not, all working inside of the same spreadsheet. Otherwise, we'd be stepping on each other's toes the whole time. And there we go. Here we have our, and I'll go ahead and zoom in on this a bit so we can see this a little bit better. I know sometimes it's harder to see this. I'll go in a little bit further in there. Hopefully that makes that a little bit easier to see there. And so what we've got here is a lot of data. If I scroll down here, let me see, what are we up to now? Oh my gosh, we have over 800 responses from over the years that I've done this. Now, it's certainly possible there could be some, yep. I probably need to sanitize my data. I should have done that ahead of time. Looks like we have a few people who decided to be a little silly with the data there. So I should have done that ahead of time. Sorry about that, guys, but we can always sanitize our data here real quick. I would say it looks like from row 783 down to 793, maybe even the next one, yes. Well, no, actually a little bit before. Looks like we've got a little stretch here from, I'm going to say 781 down to 794, where people decide to have a little bit of fun with this. So I would recommend deleting those. And if you want to take a moment and do that, yeah, we definitely have some extraneous data that has been put in there. I'll do better in the future. Sorry about that. I'll pre-check that. It's been a little while since I've pre-checked it, but we can go in and we can delete out those rows. Those certain, and there probably are a few others in here, I am sure, that are a little bit inaccurate, but that's fine. So let's say we've got this data that we've collected and we're students. I guess the question is, what could we do with it? And so what I'd like to do is just a couple, we won't go terribly deep into this, but a couple of quick things that involve some built-in spreadsheet features like sorting, filtering, formulas, things like that, graphs and charts. And again, we won't go terribly deep into it because we've got so many other things we want to look at. But for example, let's say we have all this data that we've collected now, and we want to start asking questions about it. One of the questions could be something as simple as, who's the tallest person? That's a pretty simple question. And so we could look and notice that column F is the height column. Well, spreadsheets have an option for sorting, and Google Sheets will allow us to sort all of the data. And in this case, we could do this very simply by clicking anywhere we want in the column for height. So it doesn't really matter where I click, as long as I click somewhere in column F for the height. Once I've done that, if I go up to my data menu, we're going to go up there quite a lot. This is pretty much where we're going to head over and over again. If we go up to the data menu, the very first option is to sort our sheet. And from that menu, we can choose to sort it either A to Z or Z to A. Well, since this is numbers, that would mean low to high or high to low. And the beauty is it's going to sort the entire sheet, not just that one column, but it's going to use column F to do that. So again, what I've done is I've simply clicked in column F, I've gone to data, sort sheet, and I'm going to sort, let's say from Z to A, from high to low. And when I do that, yep, I think we may have, again, this might be a good way to find some of the inaccurate data. I don't know that we've got anybody at 167 inches, unless maybe they were thinking centimeters. It's certainly possible, I guess, but I'm going to guess that's probably an inaccurate piece of data there. Maybe a good way, again, for us to help, find those things. I'm going to go ahead and delete that row out. We don't need that row in there. It looks like probably from the realistic data, it looks like we got about 82 inches as the highest height, which that is very impressive. Like I said, I'm 6'2", so that's pretty impressive up there, but that's fantastic. So that would be a quick thing we could do, is we could do a sort to find out that kind of information. However, we could also ask a little more sophisticated question that involves two things. Instead of just saying, okay, what's the tallest height? We could say, out of a certain group of people, what is something? So for example, we could say, who is the shortest person who happens to live in a rural community? I could throw in two different conditions. And so when you do that, what we're looking at doing is a multi-sort. And so if you wanted to sort by more than one thing, we can do that. It is a little bit trickier because we can't just click in one spot. What we have to do is we have to select the entire spreadsheet. We've got to grab everything so it knows that we want to sort by more than one column. And the easiest way to do that is in the very top left-hand corner. There's a little blank rectangle up there between the A and the 1 up here in the very top left. If I click that, it grabs everything. It selects the entire spreadsheet. And at that point, I can now do a more advanced sort because I've grabbed all of the data. With everything selected, I can go to my data menu, and instead of choosing sort sheet, I can choose sort range. And so that brings up the option where I can choose advanced range sorting options. This is where I can go to say I want to sort by this And then where there's ties, I want to sort by this. And where there's ties, I want to sort by that. And so you can have these multi-levels of sorting that occur. So again, just to review what I did, I started by grabbing everything. I clicked in the little blank cell in the top left-hand corner to select the entire spreadsheet. Then I went to Data, Sort Range, and Advanced Range Sorting Options. When I do that, you get this little pop-up that says, does your data have a header row? It does, so I'll check that. And now I can just build my sort. I can say, let's sort first by the community. So put them in order, put the suburbans and the rurals and the urbans, go ahead and separate them out by their community. But then I can add another sorting column and say, now, after those tie, let's then break that tie by sorting by, it could be their height, but this time I could leave it as, A to Z from low to high. Maybe if we were looking for the shortest person who chose rural as their community. And then you could just keep doing this. You could keep adding as many criteria as you want, and it will just keep breaking those ties as it goes. And so, because who knows, maybe there's more than one person, who fits that criteria. But as long as you're happy with your multiple criteria, when you're good with that, when you hit sort, it's going to sort the entire sheet by all of those criteria. Let's try that out. Let's see how that works. Let's hit sort and looks good. So my community now, it's rural all the way down until we hit, at some point here, we'll end up hitting suburban. There's the suburbans, and then we'll hit urban at the very bottom. But then, because all the rurals here are tied, if we go over to height, now we get the height. Now, my guess is these 5s and 6s are probably meant how many feet tall they were instead of inches. That's my guess. I'm guessing some folks maybe got a little confused there and thought, instead of that, they thought it was like 5 feet instead of 5 inches. Now, we can decide what to do with that. We could, go in and change that and say, well, let's fix the data, instead of 5 feet, that should be, 60 inches, and instead of 6 feet, that should be 72 inches. So you could change that. But whatever the case, I would say probably 50 inches seems to be our shortest height there from the responses that we got. All right, so now there is another option we could do here besides sorting, which is called filtering. And what filtering does is it allows you to hide things that you don't want to look at. So you can just look at the data that's important to you. So let's say all we wanted to do was look at people who were, born in a certain month. And we don't need to go through the whole list of all of these people. We just, for whatever reason, we just want to look at the people who were born in June, which was the month I was born in. So maybe we just want to look at the June people, and then we want to investigate that. Google Sheets allows you to do what's called filtering. And what filtering does is it gives you little drop downs where you can say, I only want to look at data that fits a certain criteria. Now, how do we turn this on? Real simple. We go back up to the data menu, and then from there, we choose create a filter. And when you choose create a filter, that's when these little drop downs appear across the top of your data. And there they are. As soon as I click data, create a filter, I now get these little drop downs. And so, for example, I could go to column H for what month were you born. And if I click on that little drop down, I can see at the moment it's got checks for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And I could say, you know what? I don't want to see all of those. I could say, let's clear those out and only check those born in June. Now, what it's going to do if I do this is it's going to temporarily hide all the other data that doesn't match a 6 for the birth month. The data is not deleted, it's just hidden. And that allows you to really focus in on a specific group. So if we say, let's, again, all I've done, I'll just do that again. I went to the drop down next to month. I hit clear to clear out all of the options, and then I only chose 6. If I hit OK, there we go. Now we have a subset. This is a much smaller group of data. These are just the people who were born in June. and we can just look at those. Now you can stack these. You could say, in addition to that, I'm only looking for the people who live in a suburban community. So I could uncheck rural and urban, and now I've got just the suburban people born in June. And then I could say, and I'm only looking for, people who, maybe are above a certain age. I could continue to add these. You can stack these until you get just the group that you're looking for. So those are just a couple of quick things. And by the way, when you're done with filtering, you can just go back up to data and choose remove filter, and whoosh, it all comes back. I guarantee you, you're going to forget to do that sometimes, and you're going to panic because you're going to close out the spreadsheet, come back in later and be like, oh, where's all my data? I have done that. And it's like, don't forget, turn off the filter, and it all comes back. All right. So there you go. Now, folks, we could spend, and I would be tempted to do so, we could spend the entire hour just on this data. We're not going to do that because there's so many other things we want to take a look at. But what I want to encourage you along the thought is that this is something our students can do with real world data. It doesn't have to be just made up data. Like I said, that was the very first thing I ever did as a teacher in math. We, as far as technology goes, and we didn't have much. I mean, we had email. So I emailed these schools and we collected the data, and the students, analyzed the data, and they made charts and graphs comparing our school to these other schools. And it was questions like this: how many pets do you have? How many trees are in your yard? What month were you born in? And we try to predict things like, should somebody who lives in a rural environment have different answers on some of these than others? And that allowed us to really be able to make some neat predictions there. So, all right. Before we move on, though, if you have any questions at any point, again, absolutely throw those in the chat. If there's something you're curious about, I'm going to leave that up to you guys to interrupt me on that. All right. Good stuff. Well, let's keep on moving because, again, there's a lot we want to look at here. So we're going to keep exploring. So after we've talked about analyzing data, the next thing we're going to do, we're talking about timelines. So this is a new feature. This is something relatively new. It only got added to Google Sheets in the last few months. So if you did not know that Google Sheets does timelines, it does now. It is something that is relatively new. And so basically what you can do is in Google Sheets, you're now able to enter details into a spreadsheet, including things like the start date, the end date, a title, a detail. And then after doing that, you can have it generate an interactive timeline. And that timeline will have all of the details you put in. When you click on one of the items in the timeline, it'll pop up a detail card on the side with more information about that. So let's, and I do have you don't need my template, but I do have a template which can help you get started. You do not have to use this, but it can save you a little bit of time. So let's take a look at some timelines. So first thing, and by the way, again, I do have a blog post on this and a tutorial video. So if later you need to dig back into it, you certainly can. Why don't we start with some examples just to see what a finished example would look like? Now, you don't have to open these, but if you want to, feel free to. What I've got here is a Civil War timeline and an Edison versus Tesla timeline. I'll go ahead and click on both of these, and it'll ask if I want a copy, and I'll say, yes, that is fine. And this will allow us to see what the finished timelines actually look like. All right, here we go. So here is my Civil War timeline, and then here is my Edison versus Tesla timeline. So what you'll notice is at the bottom of the spreadsheet, there's some tabs. This is the timeline tab. Then there's a tab called events. Then there's a tab called directions, where I included the directions for how I created this. So basically, here's the gist behind it. In a spreadsheet, and I'll zoom in on this so we can see it a little bit better. Always helpful to make it a little bit bigger there. There you go. In a spreadsheet, you're allowed to now put in data for the following categories: start date, end date, card title, card detail, color, and group. Now, if you don't name them exactly that, Then when you go to create the timeline, you have to tell Google which one matches which thing. So if you do name them exactly that, then it's a lot easier because it knows then to expect, oh, you're wanting to use, this for the start date and this for the end date, which is why the template saves you a little bit of time because I've already typed those in for you in the template. But what I did was I decided to use the Civil War as an example here, and I filled in some start dates. I filled in some titles for the different events, and then I filled in more details about each of those with links out to resources about them. Now, I did decide to also group things. So I had events before the war, during the Civil War, and after the war. And I even used different colors using the paint can button to fill those in, to color code those. Now, if you've done that, if you have taken some time and you filled all that in, at that point, all we basically need to do is select our columns and say, okay, these are the columns we want to make our timeline out of. And to select those, I really did nothing more than click and drag. Just did a nice click and drag across there. Now, I guess you could select everything by using that little button that we talked about earlier. That works too. That just grabs the whole spreadsheet. That saves you a little bit of time. But what you're going to notice is that now we can go to the insert button. And I know this one already has a timeline in it, but it won't hurt to add another one just to show you the process. From the insert menu, we can now choose timeline as an option there. And when you do that, it's going to go ahead and what it already has selected. We've already selected all of our data here. So if not, we could, reselect our data if we had the wrong data, but we're in good shape here. So we'll just hit OK. And there it goes. It has created the timeline tab. Now, this one already had a timeline tab over here. This just created a new one as well. But so the way this works now is I can start scrolling across and scrolling up and down if things go off the bottom. Sometimes that happens. And then if I click on any one of these, that's where that card pops up over here on the side with the additional details and the link and so forth. You can also change a few basic things. For example, up at the top, there's the option to say how many years are you looking at. I prefer to go with multi-year so you can see as much data on there as once as you can. There's also an option to squeeze more in, going from comfortable to condensed, which kind of squeezes things in a little bit more. And so you see a little bit more on the screen at once. Just depends upon what your preference is there as well. So if that seems interesting and you want to try to build one of these yourselves, what you can do to save a little bit of time is you can, in the agenda, you can use this template I've set up. Again, you don't have to. You can just do this from a blank spreadsheet. The only benefit of using the template, so if we come here and make a copy, you'll see that it already has the columns named for you. So there's the directions, here's the events, there's start date, end date, card title, detail, color, and group. So you don't have to remember what do I name them. And it already has the timeline tab created. So you don't even have to create the timeline tab. It's just waiting for you to put the data in. So if I came here and I said June 25th of 1969, which was my birthday, I could say, Eric's birthday, and now it's automatically going to add that boom right into there because I've already pre-created the timeline in this template. And so I guess that's really the idea, is just depending upon the students you're working with, if it's something that you think that additional help is going to make it easier for them, that's fantastic. But at the same time, you can also just create all of this from scratch. Now, the timelines don't always have to also go in the way I did this one, where the very first item is here, and then you scroll over and you finally get to the last items there. In the one on Edison versus Tesla, both timelines are running simultaneously, because what I did was I said, okay, here's all of Tesla's details and here's all of Edison's details, but their dates overlap. And so because I put them into a group called Tesla and a group called Edison, when you look at the timeline and you start scrolling across, you'll have both of them showing up here. Let me zoom I'll zoom back out a bit so we can see this a little bit better there. As we're going across, you can see there's blue at the top and yellow at the bottom. So here's Tesla and Edison because they lived at the same time. Now, eventually, we're going to get to a spot where one of their lines stops. So if I keep going here, let's see, there we go. And so Edison, his end of his line is here at his death. But then Tesla's line continues on a little bit further beyond that. But that's a neat way to be able to compare two things side by side just by putting them in two different groups there as well.
Eric,
Right.
what do these look like printed? Like, is there an easy way to?
No, I don't think so. That's a good question. I don't really think you're going to get a good print out of any of these. No, not really. It doesn't have another like option to break it up. If I were to come here and say I wanted to print this out, it's grayed out. There's not even a print option there. So if I try like a print screen, like Control P to print my screen, it's not even gonna be able to fit it on there. So good question. So these are not really designed for something that's going to get printed out. They are meant to be digital interactive ones where you're clicking on things and it's bringing up the details and then you're clicking on that to go out. But again, the idea behind this is it's another option for students to show their understanding. We talk a lot about student choice. Well, hey, here's another way. Maybe they could write a report. That's fine. They can make a slideshow. That's great. Maybe they want to make a timeline. And maybe this is the best way for them to be able to do that. And then they're going to share this spreadsheet with you so that you can then go in and go through the timeline and explore all of that. Yeah. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, let me check. I saw a little activity in the chat there. I want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. So Wendy, if you see something I missed as well, please let me know.
I just unmuted and asked the big question, so you're good.
All right. Thanks, guys. Very good. All right. Well, let's keep on going and let's see what we have next here. And again, please stop me at any point if you've got questions. If there's something that I skip over that you want to go back to, let me know. All right, so what's up next after timelines? So next up is learning databases. Okay, kind of a boring sounding name, but it's a neat twist on what we looked at earlier with analyzing data, because a lot of times you think of data, you think of spreadsheets, you think of numbers, and I get it. Absolutely, spreadsheets are fantastic for numbers, finding averages and and graphing things and all that, fantastic. But information isn't always numeric. And a lot of things we collect could be organized into a spreadsheet. And again, students could draw conclusions, make predictions, ask questions. So what are learning databases? The idea behind a learning database is no matter what content the students are learning, you could build a spreadsheet, and it could be a collaborative thing where each student contributes to the spreadsheet as you go through the content, collecting it all together. Now, in my example, I used animals as an example here. So if you guys want to check this one out in person, you'll see here on page 3 of the agenda, highlighted in yellow, I have the animals database. So feel free, you don't have to, but if you want to click on it, you certainly are welcome to join me in the animals database. So let me zoom in a little bit on this one so we can see it a little bit better here. All right, so this is the animals database. And the idea behind it was, what if I was teaching elementary science and we were learning about animals? And what I would do is I would assign each student an animal, and I would say, okay, your animal is dolphin, and your animal is chinchilla, and your animal is horse, and your animal is whatever, or they could choose their animals. Their job would be to go out and research that animal and bring back that information and fill it in to this chart. Now, there's a few things with some numbers in here, like their lifespan or the number of legs, but a lot of this is not numeric. We're not crunching numbers here. We're just collecting information. Well, that's just the first part of the project, is going out and doing the research. Now, it could be whatever, there's a lot of possibilities besides animals here, and we'll look at a few other examples. The real learning, though, the real learning comes in after the data's been collected. And now we go, what questions could we ask about this? And so it could be going back to things like sorting and filtering. We could start applying those things and saying, let's investigate the concept of animals that lay eggs. Well, maybe I'm working with elementary students, and they think, oh, if you lay an egg, you're a bird. Birds lay eggs, right? Well, I could come in here and I could say, let's turn on the filter. So I'll go to data and I'll create a filter. And I could say, let's uncheck anybody who has a no for laying eggs. Let's hit OK. And now here are all the animals that lay eggs. And suddenly we realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize a tarantula lays eggs. That's really cool. Oh, turtles lay eggs too. Yeah, that's right. A bee lays an egg. How neat. And suddenly we're broadening our perspective on this by, again, sorting and filtering. So that's an example of filtering. We could, of course, do sorting as well. Like we could sort by lifespan. I could come in here and say, let's sort this from, A to Z, from shortest to longest lifespan. And then we start saying, do we notice any patterns? Now, that's a pretty straightforward example with animals, but I went ahead and threw in a couple of other ones here. Like here's one on for English language arts, the book Wonder. You might be familiar with that. I said, what if you did a character database based on the book Wonder? So if you want to give a click on that one, feel free to. This will make a copy of that one for you so you can poke a stick at it and see what it's like. So in this case, as I read through the book Wonder, every time I came across a new character, I added them to a new row of the spreadsheet, and then I started answering questions about them. Now, these questions would be different depending on the book. If you were reading Romeo and Juliet, it'd be quite different questions than Wonder. But in this case, these are the kind of things that seem to be important. For example, Augie is the main character, and some characters are nice to him and some of them are not nice to him. And so that was one of the things I tracked. Are they nice or are they mean? Do they change throughout the story? And so again, now we can come in and we can use things like filtering. I could come in and say, let's turn on the filtering and ask a question. Are there characters that are both nice and mean to Augie in the story? So I could go to the nice column and say, let's just leave the yeses for the nice, and the mean column, let's just leave the yeses for the mean. And there sure are. There are 5 characters. Oops, I must have, there are 5. Yep. Got to count those again. 5 characters. Yep, 5 characters that are both nice and mean to him throughout the story. Well, now we can start having a discussion about that, or maybe we want to say, let's talk just about the mean characters. Are there any mean characters that aren't kids? Well, let's see. Let's take out the all of the ones that are in school. And yes, there's one adult that is mean to Augie, and it's Mrs. Albans. Well, how does that affect, her son and how he treats Augie? And so these are the kind of things that we can start doing once the data is in a spreadsheet like this. So even though there's not numbers here, we can still build learning databases and ask interesting questions and draw conclusions from that. All right, good stuff. All right, let's keep on going. Next up, I'll zoom back out here. Next up, we have a section on educational games. So spreadsheets, even though you may not play a lot of games in a spreadsheet, you can use spreadsheets to power games. And what I mean by that is there's a wonderful, wonderful website. You guys may already know about it, but if not, I'm so excited to introduce you to it. It's a website called Flippity. And Flippity has all sorts of educational interactive games that use Google spreadsheets as the data to drive the game. And so there's, Mad Libs and Mix and Match and Hangman and flashcards and Jeopardy games and all kinds of stuff like that. Let's go ahead. If you haven't been there before, we can head out to the site. You'll see here on page 3 of the agenda, there's a link to flippity.net. We'll head on out to the Flippity website. And once you get to the Flippity website, you can see there's a lot of educational activities here. There's a ton of them here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this too, just because it is kind of difficult to see them all. And you'll notice we've got things like flashcards. Here's their Jeopardy game, a random name picker. We've got board games. We've got a virtual breakout. Here's a timeline creator. So there you go. There's another one for creating an interactive timeline. So this might be, compare this. See how this one compares to the one we did in Google Sheets. We've got word searches, crossword puzzles, Mad Libs, tournament brackets, on and on down the line. Now, if you're curious about any of these and you go, I wonder what that one's like. Well, what you start off by doing is noticing there's a demo link under each one of these. So if you're curious, like, okay, what is this quiz show? It looks like a Jeopardy game. What is it? Well, click on the demo link and it'll pop it open. You'll be like, oh yeah, this is Jeopardy. And so it is a playable Jeopardy game. So you can decide how many teams you want. You can decrease or increase the number of teams. And then you can say, okay, let's do bees for 100, and you give a click and it says, how do bees communicate? So the team would of course answer, and then we would flip it over and it's by dancing. Now, if they got it right, we can give them the points. There, they got their points. And now it keeps track of the score and it takes that off the board. And so we can play Jeopardy right there inside of Flippity. All right, let's go back to the main Flippity site. I'm curious about the timeline. Now that we just mentioned one, I haven't played with it for a while. Let me go to the demo for the timeline. Looks like they're doing a Mr. Rogers timeline as our example here. So we've got all the dates. That's awesome. And then I imagine if we click on them, let's see what happens if we click on something. It pops open a little card underneath it. Fantastic. And so now we can go to that card, and that card can contain information, looks like multimedia as well, pictures as well as text can go into those cards. Looks really good. Love it. That's awesome. Neat stuff. All right, let's head back to Flippity again. I guess I can choose the back arrow. There we go. So let's say you go, I want to try one of these myself now. I like this. So how does this even connect to Google Sheets? Well, that's our next step here. If you decide you want to try one of these out, that's where the instructions button comes from. Underneath each one of these, you'll see a spot that says instructions. Well, let's say I want to do the flashcards. You guys can pick anything you want. I'm just going to pick the first one, the flashcards, as an example. If I click where it says instructions, it's going to bring up a tab where it says, okay, if you would like to make your own interactive flashcards, make a copy of this template. And it gives you a link to a Google spreadsheet template. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and give a click on the template, and it's going to say, would you like a copy of this template? I'll say, yes, I would. And give that a moment to pop up there. And there we go. And again, I'll zoom in on this so we can see it a little bit better. There we go. So this is for the flashcards, what the template looks like. Now, it's going to be different for every template. If you pick the Jeopardy template, it's going to have more options because there'll be columns for the different categories and columns for the questions and the answers and the different dollar amounts. Well, this is the flashcard one, which basically has a front side and a back side and a color for the card and a color for the text. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. This one doesn't have a whole lot to it, but that's great. It's perfect for flashcards. Now, what the template does is it's already pre-filled with some just filler data. You would come in and you would delete out what's in those boxes and you would type in your own. So for example, it could be something like, what year did Google begin? I think that was a question we had a little bit earlier. Wendy, is it okay now for us to find out the answer to that, to put that on? It was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 1998. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Because I remember a while back, Google had a really big thing about their 20 years of Google. And it was recently, of course, COVID makes everything seem a million years ago or something. It's a little confusing anymore these days. But 1998 was when it began. Now, it's kind of questionable, though, because Google existed before that. Sergey Brin and Larry Page met in 95, and they developed Google before, but they didn't call it Google. It was called something else. So that could be my next question. What was the original name for Google? And that I'm not expecting any, unless somebody knows. I mean, please feel free to throw it in the chat. If anybody knows, holler it out. But I'm not expecting anybody to know this. But in its earliest incarnation, it was actually called, believe it or not, it was called Back Rub. I'm not joking. That was the name of it. I'm so glad they changed that. The way we use Google as a verb, that would be so creepy. Hey, I was back rubbing you last night and I learned this information. It just seems wrong. So, but here's the point. What I do now is I fill in the front side and the back side of the cards. You can also add YouTube links. If you want a video to play, you can add links to images if you want pictures to display. So this could be great if you wanted to have multimedia on the flashcards as well. Now, after you do this, you probably want to rename the template, or else it's going to be confusing. You won't know, what it is. So I might call it like Google Trivia Flashcards or something like that. So, and again, this is just a regular Google spreadsheet, just a regular old Google spreadsheet sitting in my Google Drive. It's private to me. I'm the only one who can see it, but I could share this. You could have a group of students working on one of these together. One of them makes a copy of the template. They share it with their team and they all work together as they build their Jeopardy game or whatever it is they're going to build. Okay, well, let's pretend I'm done. I know I've only done 2 of these, but let's pretend that I've filled, and you can do as many as you want, or as little as you want. You can add as many. It's totally up to you. Now, let's say that I'm ready to actually play the game now. How do I play the flashcards? When we were back on the Flippity site, it was real easy. We just came here and we clicked the demo and it opens up and there's the flashcard thing. Well, how do we do it from our spreadsheet? Well, if you looked at the instructions there, it said, go ahead and modify your spreadsheet. Then it says you need to publish your spreadsheet and then go to the Get the Link Here tab to get the link. Okay, so look at the bottom of my template. There's a tab called Get the Link Here. There's a link to play my game, but remember what they said. Don't forget to publish your spreadsheet first. Why is that? Well, remember I told you it's private. I made a copy of the original template. Nobody else can see this. Even Flippity can't see my template. If I try to click this link now, it's just going to yell at me and say, I tried, but I couldn't open it up. It'll give up here eventually. It'll get mad at me because it can't open it up. So what does it mean to publish a spreadsheet? All it means is you go to the File menu, and then from the Share menu, you choose Publish to the Web. It just means that if somebody has the link, they can access the spreadsheet. And that's all Flippity needs. They just need access to be able to pull the data. It's not putting it anywhere that people are going to find it. It just means if you've got the link, then you'll be able to access the data. So from the File menu, I say Share, Publish to the Web, and I just hit Publish, and I hit OK, and that's it. That's a one-time thing for that spreadsheet. This link is now good. Now, this link under the Get the Link Here tab, remember the first tab is your data, the second tab is Get the Link Here. Now, if I click that, there it is. What year did Google begin? And now I can click on this and there's my answer. Or what was the original name for Google? Back rub. And if I keep going through here, these are the ones I didn't change, so largest animal on earth. And like, for example, there's some in here with pictures. So like there's the one where they added a picture of Van Gogh. And then later there's one in here with a video. So this was the video that you can play for this particular one, the element with atomic number 3. Now, what's cool is these aren't just flashcards. You can also go to the top up here and you can do a matching option. If you click matching, it shows all of them at once. And your job is to click on them and match them together. Now, this is not good in this case because they color coded them. You'd want to make sure they're all the same color because it gives it away. You can tell the yellows go with yellow. Well, you would want to go back to here and you would want to change the card colors to be the same. But for example, what was the original name of Google? It was Back Rub. If I connect those two, it takes them off. So you can do it as a matching game. There's also a practice option where it just asks you the questions. So after you do the flashcards, then you can try it just yourself by typing in the answers. And there's even more options. All these other things you can send the same data over to. So That's Flippity. It's phenomenal. It's completely free. There's no gotchas, nothing like that. This is just a guy who creates this site and just makes it available to everybody. And it's really awesome stuff there. So certainly you guys could make these activities for your students, but don't forget, we're talking about student activities. This is something your students can do, just like they can analyze data and they can build learning databases and they can make timelines. They can also say, hey, I'm going to take all the vocabulary words from this unit and I'm going to make flashcards or a Jeopardy game, or I'm going to build something out of it. And that can be a really neat way for them to show their learning as well. All right, good stuff. Let's pause there for a second. I know I can probably squeeze in one more thing with the time that we have before we grab at least one more topic. Wendy, did you see anything I missed as a question? And if not, no worries. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. We're good? All right.
You're getting lots of praise. They're loving it.
Well,
That's
hey,
great.
praise for Flippity. It's a fantastic, fantastic site. Okay, guys. So what do we have left? We still have a couple of things. We've got random generator activities, art activities, task checklists, and conditional formatting feedback. So probably the best thing I can do is give you a little elevator pitch for these so you know what they are. And then if there's one that you're really interested in taking a look at, we can spend a couple minutes on it. But basically, I have a section here on random generator activities where I talk about how you can use a random function inside of Google to create things like random writing prompts for your students or random math problems for them to solve. And I do have a couple of examples here. I've got a random writing prompt generator and an emoji writing prompt generator that I created that gives students prompts to write a poem or a story or something like that. And you're absolutely allowed to make copies of everything I've got here. You can make copies of these templates and see how those work. And again, I'm happy to go through it with you as well. Next up, I've got a section on art activities where we use Google Sheets to create pixel art, where you're coloring in the different cells, different colors. And I've got a template that you can use so that you don't have to keep going up to the paint can button. I've got a template that already has everything preloaded for you. But this can be a fun way for students to create art or to create a map or to make characters for a story or investigate some math concepts like fractions and area and so forth. Then I've got a section on task checklists, how you can use Google Sheets for students to keep track of things that they need to complete. And so I have a template that you can use that you can put in all the objectives they need to complete. And as they complete them, it will keep track of what percentage they have completed total. It'll cross things off and give them a spot to put in notes if they need to put in some evidence for their completion of that. And then lastly, I've got a section on conditional formatting feedback. And what I mean by this is those things, you've probably seen them before, where you have like a quiz or an activity where when they type in an answer, it'll turn the cell green if they got it right. It'll turn it red if they got it wrong. Well, that's all based on something called conditional formatting, where you can say, if what you type in matches this, then it's green. If it's that, then it's red, or whatever the case might be. And there's a lot of possibilities of things you can do with this. I've got some simple ones that are just like basically a quiz, and you can use my templates. You're absolutely fine. You can just make a copy of my template and you can fill in your own information, but it can be like a self-checking quiz assessment. I've got one for younger students on addition and subtraction that gives them that same sort of feedback, whether they got it right or not. I've got one for world languages, where it's a translation quiz. You put in the word in English, and then you have to put in the translation, that what you think the translation is in the language you're trying to learn, and then it checks it for you and it gives you feedback as to whether or not you got it right or not. So that's a whole thing that is really a neat use of Sheets as well. The only thing I have after that is a collection of some lessons from Google and what's their Applied Digital Skills website. And so these Applied Digital Skills is a wonderful, wonderful website where Google has tons of lessons and videos that go along with them. And I just pulled out a couple of them that are spreadsheet related. So if you want to do any of these activities with your students, the beauty of it is you don't even have to create anything. Google has already made the lesson plan, and they've already made the videos that teach the students and hold their hand step by step through making a study schedule, managing your time, organizing a club, creating a budget, making art with Google Sheets, preparing for the FAFSA, all these different things. You can go through those pre-made lessons there as well. And I think at the very end, I just have some random additional activities of fun. If I find something cool on the internet, I also have added them in. So these are mostly from other people, and I've added in a lot of other ones that people have been kind enough to share over time. Well, I know we're down to our last minute or two. So if there's any last minute questions, I am happy to take them, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. So I'm just going to say a couple of things on my end, which is, first of all, thank you so very much for letting me hang out with you guys here as always. It is such a pleasure. Remind you that everything we got to and all the stuff we didn't get to can be found at bit.ly/Curts-sheets. That'll get you to that document. And a lot of things in here, they've got more than just, the bullet list. They've got all these links. So most of the time I've included a tutorial video that I've done, or a blog post that I've done, or something that goes deeper into this if you need to dive a little bit deeper into it yourself as well. But Wendy, let me turn it back over to you. Did you see anything else that we need to address before we wrap up?
I did not see it in the chat, but that doesn't mean that you don't have any questions that you want to ask. So if you do, please unmute or pop it in the chat. I will say, I hope that you saw in the chat earlier, this wonderful session resource, or this active agenda that Eric has provided. We do upload that. Jamie and Jackie do a wonderful job about making sure that goes in the charging block. In the very far column of the charging block, you'll see the top tab says shared resources or shared drive. So make sure that you know where this is. And that's for all of our presenters. So anything the presenters share, you can go back, it's in the shared drive, but utilize this. Just like Eric said, there's so many wonderful things that, maybe we didn't have time to get to tonight. But make sure you go back and check that out. Eric, thank you as always.
Absolutely.
This was amazing. I think my mouth kind of dropped a couple times. I was like, I did not know that you could do that. The little top button in the corner of Sheets, I was like, I did not know that you could access that. And that was pretty great. So wonderful, wonderful, great session. Thank you all so much. If you have any questions, feel free to stay on. Otherwise, I did put your session evaluation in the chat. Make sure that you, Gabby will get me if I don't say this. And I do want to give a real quick shout out. She'll probably kill me, but on our screen, I want to introduce everyone to Miss Nicola Master. She is new to KEDC and to our grants team. And so let me see if I can actually, she'll probably really kill me for this. But I do want to spotlight her. So this is Miss Nicole, and you will probably be seeing her, getting emails from her. She's incredible. She's a new part of our team. And so you will see her, and I just want to say thank you for being with us tonight. And she is, like I said, a great part of our team now. And so I do want to say thank you for being on there. But Nicole and Gabby, they all do amazing, wonderful work. And on your new revised session evaluations, we have a new registration process, and we're asking that you make sure that you put your school email address. It just helps us for like knowing which school district. I know that, Jackie and Jamie are kind of learning that, Dr. Evans know that, but it just helps, we have multi-grants going on now, and it kind of helps us to know, oh yes, Sheila, she's with Knox County. We know that, so just to kind of help us with that, make sure we have your school email. We are not going to flood you with spam or anything like that, so you don't have to worry. But to get credit for your session evaluations, put your school email. That will help us with the registration so that we don't have to ask you to do a bunch of other work on that end for registration. So thank you all. Eric, thank you so much. We'll be on here if you have any questions about invoicing, anything like that. I will say thank you all so much for participating in the one word challenge. You are killing it like you do always on everything. I love Marlena's idea of using Flippity for that. We're going to come up with something really cool as always for you. So thank you all for welcoming back 2023 in an awesome way. See you all.
Wendy, I have a question. There's
Absolutely.
not a